A few years ago, the entire global automotive industry basically just ground to a halt.
Yeah, it was wild to watch.
Right, like assembly lines building these $50,000 trucks were just sitting idle. They were bleeding millions of dollars a day. And it wasn't because of a labor strike or, a lack of steel or even a drop in consumer demand.
No, it was tiny. It was because they couldn't get their hands on a 50-cent semiconductor.
Exactly, just one single missing component. And that exposed this massive, glaring disconnect between the high-level strategies these companies had on paper and the literal physical reality of their supply chains.
It was a brutal wake-up call.
Yeah.
Especially for anyone who assumed global logistics was just, about finding the cheapest supplier and throwing boxes on a cargo ship.
Right, which it definitely isn't.
Not at all. Supply chains are these deeply complex ecosystems. So when one variable shifts, whether that's a microchip shortage or a geopolitical conflict or an environmental crisis, those ripple effects really expose the true architecture of how a company operates.
And that architecture is exactly what we are dissecting in today's deep dive. We are taking a magnifying glass to section A of our source material, which really looks at the brain behind the supply chain.
The strategy and the environment.
Exactly. So we're going to figure out how manufacturing planning and control actually operates. We'll look at how external environments dictate survival and, how a company's abstract strategy, like its vision and its values, has to actually translate into the mechanical reality of tightening a bolt on a factory floor.
Yeah, and to really understand how that translation happens, our source material first forces us to stop looking at supply chains purely as physical objects.
Right, because it's not just trucks and warehouses.
Exactly. I mean, yes, the physical movement of goods is critical. The source calls this the materials and services flow.
Okay, so that's the literal stuff.
Right, and it generally moves forward from raw material suppliers through manufacturers and distribution centers all the way to you, the consumer.
Although returns do move backward along that exact same path.
They do, yeah. But if we just track the physical boxes, we're missing the engine driving the movement. The source actually identifies 3 other distinct flows operating simultaneously.
Okay, what's the first one?
So there's the information flow, which is a massive, real-time, two-way street.
Oh, like data and analytics.
Yeah, you have demand data, point-of-sale numbers, and forecasts flowing upstream, while inventory statuses and shipping updates flow downstream. It's basically the nervous system.
Because if a retailer's point-of-sale data doesn't instantly communicate a spike in demand back to the manufacturer.
The materials flow eventually starves. Exactly.
Wow. Okay. And what else?
Well, running parallel to that is the cash flow, which moves backward.
Right, because the consumer pays the retailer, who pays the wholesaler, who pays the manufacturer.
Precisely.
I actually want to pause on cash flow for a second because the text really emphasizes how critical this is beyond just, getting paid.
Oh, absolutely. It's about the cash-to-cash cycle.
Right, because if a manufacturer has to pay their raw material suppliers within 30 days, but their retail customers don't pay them for 90 days, that manufacturer has a 60-day gap where their cash is completely trapped.
And that is a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, they can have a booming materials flow and still go bankrupt because the cash flow mechanics are just misaligned.
It's a fundamental operational vulnerability. You just can't separate the physical movement of goods from the liquidity required to move them.
Makes sense.
Which brings us to the fourth and arguably most important flow mentioned in our sources, and that's the strategic requirements flow.
Strategic requirements.
Okay.
Right.
This is a top-down flow of rules, priorities, and goals pushed from the executive board down to every single link in the chain.
See, that sounds great in a boardroom. Like an executive stands up and says, our strategic requirement is to be the most agile tech company on earth.
Right.
But how does that sentence actually control the behavior of a shift supervisor on a Tuesday afternoon?
That is the big question.
Yeah, because the source material introduces a mechanism to bridge that gap called manufacturing planning and control, or MPC. But I'll be honest, the text gets incredibly dense here.
It really does.
Can you break down the actual mechanics of how MPC translates an abstract strategy into a physical product?
Sure. Well, it happens through this cascading system of translation. So at the very top, you have strategic and business planning.
Okay.
And this determines the long-term volume and financial goals. But to your earlier point, a factory floor can't execute a 5-year financial goal.
Right. They just need to know what to build today.
Exactly. So the MPC system feeds that long-term plan into priority planning.
And the engine of priority planning, according to the source, is sales and operations planning, or S&OP.
Yep, S&OP.
I've actually seen companies spend weeks locked in S&OP meetings. What is the literal mechanical output of that process?
The output is a production plan for aggregate families of products.
Families of products, like categories.
Exactly. So the sales team brings their forecast, what they think they can sell. The operations team brings their capacity, what they can actually build.
And they usually disagree, I assume?
Almost always.
Yeah.
So S&OP forces them to reconcile. The output might be a commitment that says, we will build 10,000 SUVs next month. It balances the supply and the demand at a high level.
But you still can't build a generic SUV. Like, you need to know if it's a V6, if it's painted red, if it has a sunroof.
Right. And that is where the next step of the MPC cascade kicks in. Master scheduling. Master scheduling takes that aggregate S&OP plan and breaks it down into individual stock keeping units or SKUs. It creates the master production schedule.
So it gets specific.
Very. It tells the floor, we're building 2,000 red V6 SUVs in week 1 and 3,000 blue 4-cylinder SUVs in week 2.
Okay, that makes the priority crystal clear. But I imagine you still have to, verify if reality actually allows for that schedule.
Always. Every single step of priority planning is checked against capacity planning.
So checking if you actually have the resources.
Yeah, because you might have the master schedule perfectly mapped out, but if your stamping machine is down for maintenance, or you just don't have enough workers assigned to the second shift, that schedule is just fiction.
Right. It's useless. Okay. Assuming the capacity is there, how do we physically get the actual parts to the assembly line?
That happens through the execution phase of the MPC. The system uses material requirements planning, or MRP.
MRP, got it.
Yeah, the MRP software takes that master production schedule and basically explodes it against the bill of materials.
Explodes it.
Yeah, it calculates exactly how many engines, tires, and microchips are needed, checks what is already sitting in inventory, and automatically triggers purchasing to buy the shortages.
Oh, wow. So it's fully integrated.
Completely.
Yeah.
And finally, production activity control schedules the literal minute-by-minute routing of materials right there on the shop floor.
Okay, so just to summarize this cascade, the strategic requirements flow acts as the parameters for the S&OP,
Right.
which defines the master schedule, which drives the MRP,
Exactly.
which tells the purchasing manager to go buy a 50-cent microchip.
You got it.
It's a brilliant system when it works, but honestly, it also sounds incredibly brittle. I mean, a perfect MRP system exploding a flawless bill of materials is completely useless if a supplier halfway across the world suddenly shuts down.
Yes.
So how do companies design a supply chain that anticipates that kind of chaos?
Well, by understanding that their internal operations just don't exist in a vacuum. The source material explains that a supply chain has to be designed by accounting for 3 concentric spheres of influence:
And those are?
the local, the network, and the global spheres.
Let's map these out for everyone. The innermost sphere, the local, seems, the most straightforward.
Yeah, it's the closest to home.
Right. That encompasses your internal activities, your own factories, your distribution centers, your workforce policies. It's the environment you literally have direct control over.
Exactly. The next layer out is the network sphere. And this involves the collaborative interactions with your upstream suppliers and downstream customers. You don't have total control here, obviously.
Right, because they are separate companies.
Yeah. So you design principles based on contracts, shared information systems, and strategic partnerships. You are building a system of mutual reliance.
Makes sense. So then the outermost layer is the global sphere. And this encompasses the physical environment and society at large, local communities, global workforce availability, sustainability.
The big picture stuff.
Yeah, but I have to challenge the premise here a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
I totally understand why a company obsesses over its local factory and its network of suppliers, but the global sphere often gets treated as just like a corporate social responsibility checklist, a PR exercise.
I can see why people think that.
Right. Like, how does society or sustainability genuinely dictate the hard math of supply chain design?
Well, it dictates the hard math because the global sphere literally represents the physical constraints of reality.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's look at a heavily debated industry right now. Data centers powering artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah. Huge topic.
Right. These centers require massive amounts of water for their cooling systems. So, if a company designs its network sphere to place a giant data center in a region experiencing long-term drought, they are completely ignoring the global sphere.
Because eventually the local municipality is going to cut their water supply to prioritize, residential drinking water or agriculture.
Precisely. And the second the municipality revokes their operating license, their local sphere shuts down instantly.
Wow.
The exact same logic applies to workforce availability. If a company builds a highly automated factory in a region where the societal shift has just moved away from technical and engineering education, they simply won't be able to staff the facility.
So sustainability isn't just about, environmental stewardship.
No, it is about ensuring you have raw materials and a literal license to operate not just this quarter, but 10 years from now.
That makes total sense. The outer circle relentlessly squeezes the inner circles. If you ignore the global constraints, your network collapses and your local operations are paralyzed.
Exactly.
So acknowledging these three spheres of influence is actually a matter of pure operational survival. But how does a company actively plan for this? These design principles have to be anchored to some sort of broader game plan, right?
Oh, they definitely are. They are anchored to the company's strategy. And the source defines strategy with a very specific, deliberate phrase.
What's the phrase?
It says strategy is a plan to use the organization's resources to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage.
The key word being sustainable.
Right.
Because a company can gain a temporary competitive advantage by selling their product at a massive loss just to bankrupt a rival, but they can't sustain that.
Exactly. True strategy requires a deeply aligned structure, which the source actually describes as the strategy hierarchy.
Oh, the Russian nesting dolls analogy. Walk us through how that hierarchy is layered. Because the alignment between the levels is where, honestly, I think most companies actually fail.
They absolutely do.
Let's use an automotive company pivoting to electric vehicles as an example. At the very top, you have the corporate strategy. According to the text, this is the overarching plan to improve the competitiveness of the whole organization.
Right.
So the corporate strategy might be, we are transitioning entirely to zero-emission vehicles by 2035.
And that sets the direction for the entire enterprise.
Right. But below that, you have the business strategies. This is the plan to improve the competitiveness of an individual line of business.
So it breaks down.
Yeah. So the commercial trucking division has a vastly different business strategy for going electric than the consumer sports car division does. I mean, they operate in different markets with totally different competitors.
Exactly. Which then cascades down into the functional area strategies.
Yes, this is how marketing or human resources or finance plans to actually support that specific business strategy.
So marketing figures out how to sell the range of the new EV battery.
While HR has to figure out how to recruit battery engineers. And finally, at the very bottom, you have the operation strategies.
The smallest doll.
Right. This is the literal plan for how the function will perform the work. Retooling the assembly line, sourcing the lithium for the batteries, updating the safety protocols on the floor.
And this is where the concept of alignment becomes so critical.
How so?
Well, let's say the operations strategy team is under intense pressure to cut costs. So they decide to source cheaper, heavier materials for the vehicle chassis.
Okay.
But the functional marketing strategy is actively selling the vehicle based on its ultra-lightweight efficiency and maximum battery range.
Oh, I see. The strategies are fighting each other.
Yes. The operations team is literally building a product that invalidates the marketing team's promise.
Which undermines the business strategy, which ultimately taints the corporate strategy. The whole hierarchy basically shatters.
Exactly. And to prevent that shattering, an organization relies on the strategic planning and management process.
Okay.
And the source makes it extremely clear that this isn't just, a static document created in an executive retreat and put in a binder. It is a continuous cyclical loop.
It has to be a loop, right? Because the global sphere is constantly changing. New regulations, new technologies, fluctuating commodities.
Yep.
If the strategy doesn't adapt, it just dies.
Exactly. The cycle basically operates as an engine. You gather internal and external information, you use that to set strategic objectives, you develop the strategy, you execute it, and then critically, you monitor, evaluate, and correct.
And then it loops.
Right. That evaluation feeds right back into gathering more information and refining the objectives for the next iteration.
But there is a starting point to this loop. Looking at the source material, every single cycle of that strategic planning process begins at the exact same place.
Defining the mission, vision, and core values. They are the anchor. If an organization lacks a clearly defined understanding of who they are and where they are going, they have absolutely no filter for gathering information or setting objective.
They will just chase whatever trend is popular that quarter.
Exactly.
Let's draw some hard lines here, though. In corporate culture, mission and vision are so often mashed together into just like a word salad of meaningless buzzwords on an About Us page.
All the time.
Functionally, within the context of supply chain planning, what is the actual difference between the two?
So the source distinguishes them entirely by time and scope.
Okay.
A mission is anchored in the present. It outlines the overall goals within the current business scope.
So it's today.
Yeah, it defines exactly what the company's doing right now, who its primary customers are, and the specific value it provides to them today. It is operational reality.
While the vision is aspirational.
Yes. The vision is a shared perception of what the organization wants to become in the future. If the mission is the physical vehicle you are driving today, the vision is the destination on the map you are navigating toward.
That's a great way to put it. And the core values. Because again, the cynical view is that these are just, inspirational posters in a break room.
Yeah, but in a high-performing supply chain, core values are not decorative. The text defines them as the organizational guide for all business and ethical decisions. They are the guardrails for the strategic planning cycle.
Okay, let's tie this all the way back to the beginning of our deep dive. How do the mission, vision, and values literally dictate the movement of materials and cash? Like, how do they connect to that strategic requirements flow we talked about earlier?
Think about the S&OP process we discussed.
Sales and operations planning.
Right. When sales and operations are fighting over the production plan, sales wants infinite variety to please every single customer, and operations wants to build one single item for maximum efficiency. How do they actually resolve that conflict?
They use the core values and the vision as the ultimate filter.
Exactly. If the vision is to be the premier, highly customized luxury brand, the tie goes to the sales team's complex forecast.
But if the vision is to be the lowest cost provider of essential goods, the tie goes to operations efficiency.
You nailed it. And once that S&OP plan is finalized, it becomes the master schedule, which triggers the material requirements planning.
The MRP.
Right. So if a company's core value explicitly demands environmental sustainability, that value dictates the functional purchasing strategy.
How so?
Well, the MRP system will be configured to only trigger purchase orders from suppliers in the network sphere who meet strict environmental audits, even if it costs slightly more.
Oh, wow. So the core values are actively blocking a buyer from clicking purchase on a non-compliant supplier.
Exactly.
The abstract words on the wall are quite literally rerouting the physical flow of materials on cargo ships.
They are. And if the values aren't clear, the strategic requirements flow becomes completely polluted. The S&OP meetings end in gridlock, and the shift supervisor on the floor is executing a confused, contradictory plan.
That is the real anatomy of a supply chain right there. Everything is connected, from the societal constraints of the global sphere down through the strategic hierarchy straight into the software exploding the bill of materials.
It really is.
It's a fascinating journey when you look at the whole map. We started today by breaking down the literal mechanics of a supply chain, the forward flow of materials, the backward flow of cash, and the vital two-way street of information.
Yeah.
But then we looked at the brain controlling it all. The manufacturing planning and control system translating strategy into a schedule.
And we saw how that strategy really must account for the environment, the local, network, and global spheres of influence.
Which you do by maintaining a continuous cycle of planning and execution.
Right, always anchored by a clear mission and vision.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, the application of this is universal. I mean, you don't need to be running a massive global logistics network to apply this framework.
No, not at all.
If you are managing a small team, or even just your own career, the principle is identical. Your daily operations, your local sphere, your daily task list must perfectly align with your ultimate goals, your vision.
Absolutely.
Because if your innermost strategies are at war with your outer objectives, your system will eventually break down under the friction.
Alignment is what creates a sustainable advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Without it, you are just reacting to the environment instead of actually competing in it.
Very true.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to ponder that really takes this entire framework into the future.
Okay, let's hear it.
We talked a lot today about how the strategic requirements flow pushes the mission and values down the chain to control the mechanics.
The top-down control.
Right. But look at the trajectory of modern supply chain software. We are rapidly approaching an era where artificial intelligence will essentially run the MPC systems.
Oh, definitely. It's coming fast.
AI will forecast the demand, optimize the S&OP, and automatically trigger the MRP purchasing based purely on algorithmic efficiency. So here's the question. If an algorithm is optimizing your physical materials, information, and cash flows strictly for maximum efficiency and profit, how does it actually interpret core values?
That's a scary thought.
Right. Can you code a corporate conscience into supply chain planning software, or will an entirely automated system eventually decide that your human-centric vision is simply, an inefficient bottleneck to be routed around?
Wow. That is the ultimate test of whether your values are truly integrated into your operations or if they were just, human bias waiting to be optimized away.
Something to think about the next time you hear a company boast about their fully automated logistics. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning how the big picture connects to the daily details, and we'll see you next time.